Hey, Chris, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah. So right now I'm the EVP of Sales and Partnerships at a company called Breaktime Media, and we build digital content mostly for CPGs like General Mills, Unilever, PepsiCo, anybody that you have in your cupboard or your bathroom, they're probably a client of ours. And the content we build tends to be really interactive, like personality quizzes, videos, and then we promote it to an audience and guarantee performance against it. So been here for 8.5 years now, which is a lifetime. And then prior to this, worked in a B2B tech marketing role at a company called Tech Target.
Yeah. And why sales for you?
I think it's one of those things you fall into after college when you're like, I don't know what I want to do, right? And you're like, do I want to be an accountant or do I want to go into sales? And
Yeah.
I had some friends who were, first year sales reps at a company that I worked at, Tech Target, and I had to do an entrepreneurship uh, job shadowing, and I job shadowed my friend, and the next thing you knew, I walked out of the job shadow with an offer. So I was like, guess I'm doing this now.
Yeah. Did it feel natural at first, or was it kind of a fish out of water?
I think some of it was natural. Connecting with people, I've always been pretty good with, but I think just like anybody else, there was a ton of stuff that didn't feel natural. Anytime you go into something new, there's some troubles and you lose confidence. You're like, was this the right decision for me? So I think some things were natural and some things weren't, and you just kind of work through it.
How long did it take before you felt like you were good at it?
Uh, I don't know. I've been doing it for 13 years, so I'm still getting there,
Yeah.
right? I think there are certain parts of your job that you're always really good at, and then there are other things that you just got to keep working at. So I think, the way I talk to my team is continuous improvement all the time. We're not perfect. We're not even close. So let's just try to get better every day. And that's honestly the kind of mentality that I've always taken.
And you're selling to marketing people, right? That's your
Correct.
persona. Yeah. They're
Yep.
easy, aren't they?
There, I'll tell you, I like selling to marketers because I feel like that's how my brain works,
Is it?
especially consumer marketing, right? I think it's cool because if you see a commercial, Brian can be like, was that good? Was that bad? Did that impact me? Does that make me want to buy the product? So I like selling to marketers because I can more so understand where they're coming from because it's in the consumer landscape. So yeah, that's good, but they also have a million options, right? So
Right.
it's why us over everybody else.
And also in a short tension span.
Yeah, I guess it depends on who you're talking to, but they're all super, super busy. So, one of the things that we always preach is just make sure that whatever you're pitching, however you're pitching it, it's as simple as possible. And it's always about what's in it for them. Why does it matter? Why do they care what you're selling?
Yeah. As opposed to what is it and how's it work?
Yeah, no, those details we can get into later, but hey, what's the output that is going to end up happening here for you? Let's start there and then move backwards.
And I got to imagine CPG is obviously big companies, right?
Massive. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
small startups, venture backed. No,
No.
they've been around forever.
Yep. Yeah.
And getting them to change or take on something new, is there a particular method that you've come up with for that? Or
No, if I had a method to it that worked, I'd be multimillionaire, right? But I think the methods that we use are just showing data as to how things perform previously, whether at their organization or like organizations, and then starting in that place, and then just being really good about asking questions, understanding needs, and then coming with a solution.
yeah. And did you come up with that, or was that just trial and error, or was that what the company was doing before you got there? Or
Yeah, I think there's always been a part of the solution oriented sale at break time.
yeah,
But I think it's just how I've been able to be successful is understanding problems and then coming with a solution as opposed to just having a product and saying, here's what our product does. It's awesome. You need it, right? They have to understand why they need it. And if you can understand, hey, what's causing you headaches every day? And if you can alleviate some of that pain that they're having, that's usually a trigger for people to buy.
and what's the hardest part of the sale?
It's a good question. I think just getting in, you had mentioned CPGs are massive companies, right? So they're very used to doing certain things with, it's kind of like recycle, refresh. Let's do the same thing that we did the year before, the quarter before. So getting somebody to take time away from their day to say like, hey, you should use us as a new vendor. Here's why. I know it's going to be extra effort, but it's going to pay dividends for you. So being a change agent in that respect is probably the hardest piece.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And do they probably all use agencies too, don't they?
Yeah, that's a great point. Everybody has an agency, and then usually it's 3 or 4 different agencies, some for media, some for creative, some for what's called shopper marketing, some for consumer promotion. So we'll at any time be talking to 2 to 3 agencies under one CPG to get a deal done.
And did they connect you to the agency, or does the agency connect you to the prime, the end customer?
Usually the former. So we'll start talking to the client directly. They'll say, this is really cool. You should talk to our agency. Agencies usually like to hold their cards close to the vest and say like, don't talk to my client. But
Right.
we have found a lot of luck in showing clients what we can do and what we've done for some of their peers, and then getting that intro to the agency, which makes the agency a whole lot more susceptible to actually taking the meeting.
Yeah. And which one's easier to sell to?
It depends client to client, right? But the benefit to agencies is that they have multiple clients. So if something doesn't work out with one CPG,
Right.
they probably
Yeah.
have 4 others that they're like, oh, your solution is perfect for this thing that I'm working on over here. So we've had a lot of luck in getting in with agencies, them seeing the results of programming, and then bringing us 2 different clients.
And what was your motive to get into leadership versus staying a rep?
Yeah, I think you just always want to grow.
Yeah.
And I think once things get like a little stagnant, you want to try to figure out, hey, what's next? Like, how can I challenge myself in my career? And just decided to take on a leadership role with like 1 or 2 reps at first, and then started running the whole sales and partnership program at break time. And I think the hardest part is going from an individual contributor where it's like, hey, I did all this and that's my motivation and that's what inspires me. And then flipping that to be like, I need to be inspired by other success. That's something I'm still certainly working on. But it's also, once you see somebody who you've kind of groomed crush a call, get a big deal, there isn't much of a better feeling than I can remember in the past few years, for sure.
Yeah. And is that kind of supplanted the kind of money motivation and individual contributor? I got this. I started with nothing, and here it is.
Yeah, I think so. There's still
No,
such a
yeah,
high, right?
yeah,
When you're in a room, like in a big conference room, and you just crushed a pitch, like there's not much to me that's better than that. I still love to be involved. But obviously seeing reps dominate too is super cool. So I don't want to just come in here and BS you and say like, no, like I don't like to sell anymore. I just like to lead. I still like to do both. I like to have kind of that hybrid approach for sure.
yeah. And the hybrid, it gives you a taste of both, but the context switching can be kind of schizophrenic at times, can't it?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, that's an interesting balance, right? Is when to stop and let it go, and when to jump in. So I'm still learning that piece for sure.
Yeah. And what was that first year like? Was it hard or was it natural? Because some reps have that natural tendency to kind of be the team lead, where others are like, I know what I'm doing. Leave me alone. Do
Yeah,
my thing.
for me, what I realized I was not good at was explaining why I did what I did as a rep. It
Yeah.
just kind of came natural to me, and then I realized that I needed to develop like teaching language as to, hey, here's what you're doing, here's the why behind it, here's what I did, here's why I did it. So I think the last few years I've really been focused on making sure all of my reps know the why, instead of just moving really fast and making changes on proposals or emails or pitches, and then all of a sudden them being like, well, why'd you do that? It worked, but why? And that's been a focus of mine the last couple of years, is making sure I'm telling them the why.
And how about like the performance of the job? Because you brought that up, that we're not perfect, right? Which also means you're not awful. And each call, pitch, interaction has a level of quality to it. How do you keep other people thinking that way, as opposed to I know what I'm doing?
Sure. So one of the things that we preach is just doing absolutely everything with purpose, from prospecting to building a proposal to making sure the quite literally the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted on a contract. So I think from our standpoint, everybody that we have is a full-time and full cycle seller. So from setting their own meetings to sending contracts and managing the program. So I think just making sure your reps know that every piece of the sales cycle is super important and everything has weight as to how it's going to impact something later on. So we just try to think of do everything with purpose. How you do one thing is how you do everything, and just focus on one thing at a time and move from there.
Yeah. And what do you see as the difference between the very best reps you've observed? Doesn't have to be current or on your team, just in your career, and the good ones, the ones that are, good solid players, but they're not killing it.
Yeah. So I think going back to what I said a couple seconds ago is just they do everything with purpose, right?
Yeah.
From outreach to pitching a client, they pay attention to the details. They don't just go through the motions, right? I think everybody's had reps where they just go through the motions, and you're like, hey, you need some weight behind this. You need to understand the purpose. And I think just in general, the best reps, and I'm sure you know this, they tend to think about where to skate versus just chasing the puck.
Yeah. And when
Um,
you say purpose, what does that mean to you?
So I think sometimes people just go through motions. If
Yeah.
you're making calls, it's like, hey, I know I just need to make 20 calls today, right?
Yeah.
But what if somebody answers? Do you know what you're going to say? Do you know when they say this, where to go from there? Do you know everything that could happen in that situation? So I think just taking a moment and just thinking, hey, what is the desired output here? And saying, I need to do everything with purpose instead of just going through the motions, because that's what's really going to impact everything is if you're prepared and if you're doing it with purpose.
Kind of the both combination of thinking and caring.
Definitely. Absolutely. Yeah. The effort, the thinking, the caring, and just being overly prepared is incredibly important, because I know it's happened to me, but you're a rep, you're making calls, nobody's answering, all of a sudden a big wig answers and you're not ready for it. And you just want that 10 seconds back. And all you had to do was put a little forethought into it, take a beat and say like, okay, when he answers, when she answers, what am I going to say? And if they say this, what am I going to say? And it's amazing what forethought can do for the success of your business.
Because a lot of leaders think that's just innate and doesn't need any prep, any practice, any thought. It's like walking, like it's just unconscious. And because I did a post on LinkedIn about this, that thinking is the most important activity that no one gives any time for. And one leader says, well, you can think all day and if you don't do anything, or you can do it all day and not think and get nothing. Because people look at thinking like it's do that on your own time, right? When you're here, you're digging and shoveling and piling up deals.
Yeah, I mean, I would obviously side with you on that, where it's if you're not thinking before you're doing something, you could just outsource that job anywhere to anybody, right? Like anybody can do it. You have sales reps because you have a product that people need to buy. They're not just lining up at your door to buy it, right? So there's a lot that goes into making sure people know why it's there, how it makes sense, how it benefits them. And that's the job of the sales rep, right? Is to make sure that every prospect possible knows what you can do for them. And it's going to be a different message for each person. So you can't just send the same thing and rinse and repeat. It's got to be thought about. And when you're on a call, like the prep work that goes in beforehand is super important. The prep work that goes into building a proposal and the prep work that goes into even cold calling is super important. So forethought is something that we preach a lot. And then we'll also just talk to our reps. And one of the things that I always say is do whatever your future self is going to be the most excited about. So think about today, if you're Brian tomorrow morning, what are you going to wish that you did? And do it now, don't wait.
Yeah. Because a lot of leaders don't think that way. They like give the KPIs, the activity drives results. And it's like, well, activity is one ingredient. You need it. We all got to get out of bed in the morning,
Yeah.
right? But that doesn't mean you're going to be successful in sales, especially something that's so artisanal as the communication of, especially a lot of the people that are selling in your company probably aren't marketing people by trade.
No, they're all sellers, right? So it is, yeah, I couldn't preach enough that the thought before you do something is incredibly important. And those who think that you can just get away with making 100 calls and making sure that you have those numbers up, maybe that works for some companies. I know it does not work for ours, because we need to have strategic conversations. And especially these days, where if email is your tool to get through to people, every marketer in the world is ignoring every email they're getting. So what are you going to do to stand out? How are you going to make it about them? How are you going to get them interested? And it's going to be, I'm not sending a rinse and repeat email to everybody. It's, hey, I thought about what Brian cares about. I researched Brian. I know his company in and out. Here's a short and sweet message that says, I know you. Here's what we can do. Here's why you care. Boom, let's talk about it.
And that's it, that empathy, understanding what the other person cares about. Making it about them requires you to think about them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Required reading, How to Win Friends and Influence People at our company.
Right. And, everyone reads it, but it takes a lot because that's a real advanced skill, that thinking like somebody else that you haven't met yet. Right?
Definitely.
And your persona, I think, is one of the hardest. It's definitely one of the most beat up and ephemeral. You have a great conversation and things change the minute you hang up. I've dealt with a lot of marketing people in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And they've got infinite options and everything sounds great. And they always start in one direction, and like a cat with a little laser toy. They go right.
Yeah.
Because they're always beat up. Everyone in the company's got an opinion about their marketing, right?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Have you found a particular way of developing reps?
So on our side, we have a pretty robust training program as they're coming on, and then allowing them, as we're going through and they're setting up calls, to break up the calls, to at first let them focus on, hey, I'm really confident in this piece, and then adding little bits into it. So they might take the upfront questions on the first ever call they set up, and then I'll take the pitch and the closing piece. And then the next time they'll take the questions and the pitch, and the next time they do all three of them. So it's almost like bringing up a minor league pitcher too early. We try to be very careful so that our reps can maintain confidence and learn. And then we're constantly doing just continued education, which I think is wildly important, from online trainings to watching master classes together. We do a book club. So every week we meet and talk about a book that one of the reps gets to choose the new book after we finish the old one, and they lead the discussion. So those are ways that we're constantly training and just kind of learning new things and making sure everybody's on the same page.
Well, I like the book club thing because, books come up a lot. And if you read them, it's good. But if you discuss them, it's great.
Yeah. And then we make sure that people come with examples of how they used what they learned in, whether it's client outreach, interactions, because the other thing is, you can read a book, you can discuss it, but if you don't put it into practice, nothing's changed in your life. So we want to know how you're doing with that, what you've done. Even if it's uncomfortable and it doesn't work, just try it, see what happens. And you never know, you might get something that's going to work for you the rest of your life. I know that's happened to me in a few instances, and now it's just hardwired into me based on things that I've learned and then put into practice.
And when you're looking to hire reps, what are the key things that you look for?
It's a good question. So we had a BDR posting, and in 2 days we got 150 applications.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was a lot. And then through interviews, I think a few of the things that we look for is just coachability, active listening, good questions based on what they've heard, right? So going along with active listening, detailed follow-up afterwards. I've noticed a lot of younger reps these days just send the most generic stuff, 2-line sentence. Hey, it was great to meet you. Would love to take next steps. Why do you want to take next steps? What did you like?
Right.
What other
Yeah.
questions do you have? Why you? So that type of detail goes a long way.
Because a lot of hiring managers send me notes. It's like, do people not send follow-up emails anymore after an interview?
Man, there was a couple people who did a really good job on the interviews recently and then didn't send an email follow-up. And we're like, what are you doing? What are
Right.
you doing?
And that's it. And it's not just thanks for your time, great to meet you. What you stated was like, why are you interested? Why are you a great match? What did you get out of the interview? What
Yeah.
additional questions do you have? Can you drive a next step?
Because that's what you need with clients too, right? Like you
It's
want to
not
translate that
a
into emailing
foreign
clients.
function, right?
No, no. So that'd be advice for reps is if you're looking for a job, make sure that you're putting the time and a purpose behind your follow-up with that hiring manager, whoever you talk to.
And what signals do you look for as far as coachability? Is there particular questions, or do you see if it surfaces naturally? Do you look for it in the resume? Do you look for some past situations where they've
Yeah.
been kind of on a team and coached and gotten feedback? It may not have
Yeah.
been
It's a good question. A lot of times what we'll do is there'll be multiple interviews with us and we'll give them feedback on what they did well the first interview and then have them see if they take that feedback and put it into action in the next interview. Or when we're given feedback, because one of the things that we do is, all right, if you want to work for us, your final interview is going to be like, give us a pitch on what break time does. And what we want is to give somebody feedback right there and then and have them be like, all right, let me do it again. Let me do it again. Let me try right now. So
yes.
that's the ultimate is when somebody is ready to do it, they're not scared, and you can see them putting feedback into place right there and then.
And that's the distinction. It's
Mm,
not how well they did the presentation. It's how well they heard the feedback, ask for the opportunity, and demonstrate that they heard it and are trying to apply it.
yeah, that's perfectly put, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, where did you come up with that? Did you have that in your previous role? Did you have a mentor? Did you naturally know that the only way you can get better is to focus on getting better?
I don't think it was something that we put into practice. I think we just saw some reps do it and we were impressed and we're like, everybody should be doing this. When we give feedback the next interview, they should input that feedback. We should be able to see that. So now that's something that we certainly look for.
And have you found a lot of people just stone cold, don't get it? Or they try and rationalize why they did it the other way, even worse.
Yeah, I have seen the rationalization. Like I remember there was a guy who spelled a few things wrong in a sample email that he sent us. And we were talking to him about it. He's like, I did that on purpose because I want people to know that I'm a real person and not a robot. And we're like,
Mm,
you're
mm.
emailing marketers. As soon as there's a spelling error, they're not going to like it. So
Yeah, they're kind
yeah,
of persnickety about, right. It's the look pretty department, right? It's by the time they put something out, it has to be perfect because that's all they do
yeah,
is put
yeah.
stuff out. And that rationalization, because I did a thing the other day about coachability, and it's like the opposite of coachability is rationalization, where you kind of know you did something wrong and you're trying to explain it to yourself and others why it's right,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
which is even more dangerous because now you know you're wrong, but you continue anyway.
Yeah, and you can just see that type of person and how that would go with everything in their life, right? Is if you're rationalizing negative behaviors, your whole life is just going to be a, a stalemate of this is who I am and I'm not going to change. I'm not going to get any better.
Right. Yeah. The world has to adapt to me.
Yeah. Yep. Not a great way to be.
Not in sales.
No, no.
Oh, what motivates you? What's your driver, your why?
So I think that's changed a bunch over the years. If I think about just starting, it was to prove that you could do this. And then as you get into like your mid 20s and you're in a groove, it's, hey, I can make adult money and do adult things, buy houses, invest, all that fun stuff. I think early 30s, it's the flip with management and saying, hey, I want to see others succeed. I want to teach people and then watch them flourish. And then I think now a lot of the motivation is financial in a sense, but just thinking about the future. I have 2 kids now and making sure they're secure and thinking about retiring early. So those and just never struggling with money, I think that comes into play a lot too.
And what do you look for in reps as far as their why?
I don't think a lot of reps know their why.
Yeah.
I think everybody says they're money motivated, right? And then you get to know them and you watch them and you see when they get excited. And with some people, they get really excited over positive reinforcement and they just want that feeling of being
Success.
accepted and feeling successful. Other people are just like, hey, I want to be part of a great company with good people, and that could be their motivation. So even for me, like figuring out my why has been hard. As I was thinking about this interview, I was like, what is it? What is it really? What do I think about the most? So I think it takes some thought
It
and I
does.
think some perspective from other people to say like, hey, when have you seen me get most excited in this role? And then taking a step back and being like, wait a minute, it's not just money. I'm motivated for other reasons, and finding those reasons is really interesting.
Because if you don't have that motive, especially in sales early, when you get the failure, you hit the wall, the deal doesn't close for whatever reason, you have to be able to both recover and motivate yourself to move forward. And I've been thinking a lot about that caring and that emotional connection to some success in sales. If you don't have that, are you going to do the work?
Mm, yeah. I think in that scenario, a lot of the time it's on the manager to show the bright side of a failed deal and the opportunity that is outside of just that component of your role, right? So, yeah, I think the motivational factors are interesting going rep to rep, and everybody's so different. But I do think from a managerial perspective, just making sure every rep knows that you care about them not only as a rep but as a person and taking interest in their life. I think that no matter what is universal with good managers, is just making sure they know you care about them a bunch, not just as a revenue generator.
Because that's what they all need to see to take the feedback.
Yeah. And they need to see you taking feedback too. So a lot of times
Yeah.
you'll ask the reps, hey, what can I do better? How can I be a better manager? What do you like? What don't you like? And then even doing like trainings with them. I feel like a lot of
Yes.
managers will be like, okay, you guys do this training and I'm not going to do it live with you. But if you have
Oh
a
my
manager
God.
that's in the trenches with you and they see you make a mistake or they see you try and they see you do something new and you're practicing the same things they are, to me, that's the type of manager that I would want to work for. So that's the type of manager I want to be.
And that builds the right culture
Absolutely. Yeah.
instead of,
Yep.
oh, you're not doing it my way, it's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, going back to nobody's perfect. We're not perfect. So let's try new stuff and hopefully it works out. And if it does, great. If not, at least we tried. Right.
Yeah. And what would you say to a rep who's not sure if they want to get into sales leadership or not?
Sales leadership in particular.
Yeah, say they're a good rep,
Mm,
making their number, they like it, but probably the same thing you went through, and everyone goes through. After 5 or 10 years, you know, the, there's a pattern there, right? You get a new
yeah.
comp plan, new territory, so you either try and find a way of making it work or go somewhere else, or
Sure.
maybe I'll try that. Man, it looks pretty cushy up there. up in the ivory tower. No?
Yeah. I guess I'd probably say to start thinking about the why in what you do as a rep and
Right.
understand that, write it down so that when you're teaching, you know what to say and how to break it down. I think that's, as we mentioned earlier, that's one thing that I lacked when I started doing the more of a leadership role is I had a difficult time explaining why. And I think if I started thinking through deals that I was running and started making notes on what happened, why I went this direction, it would have been a whole lot easier for me to explain that to a rep in real time as I was more in that coaching role.
Cool. Hey, really appreciate your time today, Chris. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
Yeah, you can just go LinkedIn, check out Chris O'Grady. You can also just check out breaktimemedia.com, and I'm on there too.